And I thought I'll look at the custom connectors that we have inside of Power Platform. But first, before we do that, we're going to start off with looking at basically what we have out of the box and standard connectors and what those mean and how we can use them inside of both PowerApps and Power BI and Power Automate, but also in context of business applications when we want to get data in and out, even if it's a CRM or an ERP solution. So my background is in ERP, and I thought once this notion of Power Apps and Power Platform came in, I felt like I got this superpower because I'm not a developer in any way, but suddenly I could start doing all these things and connect to different connectors and different applications outside of the confines of what we have inside of F&O, and it really opened up a lot of venues that I could go in and explore. And then I had to go deep in and I had to learn about APIs and how those works and all these things. And they're great resources on the web. And I'll show you some of these things. So I thought I'd share my screen. We can get going. Here we are. So 1, 2, 3, and magic. See? That's great. So thank you so much for having me. I've seen some of the sessions and I followed along on YouTube, and it's amazing the speakers and the sessions that you have. I'm very envious of all the content that you got in Hindu and all these nice things that I couldn't follow along, but I did see some of the content and it looked great. All right, let's see if this, here we go. Yeah, so what I said, my name is Fredrik Satra. My professional background is in supply chain, in manufacturing. That's where I normally work and consult. And then I also run the Dynamics podcast. So if you look up DIN podcast and look at that, it would be greatly appreciated. Also an ex-MVP before I started at Microsoft. Sadly, you can't carry that title through. And I'm just, in general, super enthusiastic about technology. So the agenda for today, general introduction, we've done that. Next up is the Power Platform connectors. Just look at what the standard is, and we'll look at how these can be utilized inside of your apps. And you probably already know most of these, but I'll understand a bit of the context and what I think when I see the connectors and how I would use them. Then we have APIs in general. What are they? How do we use them? And when you start going down that avenue, there is endless possibilities of what you can do inside of automation, connecting to different business applications. And we'll see even now, moving forward, there are billions of data, like petabytes of data out there that you can just access through these APIs. So you definitely want to get your skills up and running on this, because it is quite amazing what you can get to. And I'll show some resources where you can go both learn about it and also explore the world of open APIs that are available. And then we'll look at the custom connectors, what they are, and I'll just take you through to create your first connector and how that works. And then we'll have a Q&A in the end, hopefully, that we get time to that. Normally, I get too enthusiastic about telling you about the features, so I'll see what I can do on time here. So the first thing with the connectors that's out of the box, we can look at them when you connect to your workspace, the Maker portal on PowerApps. You'll see the data connectors down there. What's great is that this is contextualized within each user. So each user is authenticated. And you saw, actually, I noticed one of the keys inside the flow that Junaid showed. You definitely have to renew that, Junaid, because having security around connectors is really imperative to IT organizations. And when you create and use the connector repository and set these up correctly, every bit of authentication is in context of the user. So each user, if I add the Twitter connector, for instance, I have to log in with my credentials. So I don't use the primary IT, and everything is contextualized. And if you don't have access, you won't get access to do this. So it's a very safe way of actually adding data connectors into your organization. So the connectors from an IT perspective is really great at that. And out of the box right now, there are over 500 connectors. And these are primarily made by Microsoft in many of these cases, but also by ISVs and third-party services. So I think we'll see an influx of more connectors coming in, a lot more moving forward. There will be a great incentive when you have a web service to expose that into the Power Platform in general and standardize these connectors. So I think we'll see a great increase in this, not just from Microsoft, but also from third-party services, and then also the community. And I'll show you a web page that Thomas Sanser, another MVP, has made, where you can publish your own connectors, and hopefully that will also increase, where we can go out and we can crowdsource this. If the vendors are not going to do it, let's do it together. So if we'll just go in, and you can see here, I've put up this one here. The data connectors are always in context of the user, as I said. When we look at the connectors, we can, from an IT perspective, publish any type of connector out, or we can create a new connector. So you see I have some connectors here, one to a Salesforce connector, the Office connectors, and some custom APIs that I've made connectors from as well. And we're going to go through these. We're going to republish one of these. So when you create a new connection, and you can do this when you create an app, but if you don't have this open, if you open an app that requires a connector, it will ask you to authenticate and credentialize yourself when you open that app. And if we look at the Twitter, for instance, you'll see that when you open that, we're not going to create it, but let's just have a look. When you add this into your environment, you can either use a own application, the Twitter application, or you can use the default API. And when you connect to this, it will ask you actually to log on to your Twitter accounts. So you see everything here is very secure. You're not going to have a common account that everybody logs into. Everybody logs into their own accounts, but you can use that in context of any user. So that's really important to know. So when we create even custom connectors, the authentication is something that they would have to add themselves. So what we're going to look at is the custom connectors, but I did want to just show you a web page or a Power BI report. This is a dashboard made by, I don't know who made this, but it shows all the different connectors that are in the application. You can see here, there's 509 right now and increasing. This is a very nice web page where you can see what's included in Office 365, how many premium connectors there are. And I think, as I said, when we see more services added, if you want to use custom connectors, you need to have a premium subscription. But as more and more services add these, I think they will be not requiring you to have a premium connector or a premium license to do that, but you'll rather pay for the services that are in the cloud. So many of the free ones that you see here that are connected, like Asana or AtBot or Basecamp, you pay for those services, and then you can add that into any, if you want to add it to a Power App, or you want to add it to a Power Automate flow, you can actually just create those connectors here. So that's quite neat. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the other side of the coin, right? Because we're always talking about community and citizen development. But what we're looking at is the pro dev side also has a great incentive to do this. And there are a lot of ways to create these connectors. One of the things that I saw, like you can always create automation by creating some long flows and all of these things. But if you want to add business logic and you want to add some standardization to it, a way to do that from a pro dev perspective will be to create Azure functions. And Azure functions are just tiny applications that you publish out of Azure, containerized applications that you can call any way you want. And you can the pro devs can go out and create these applications, but then you as a consumer, and they'll make that data available as a connector inside of Power Platform. Another way of doing it is inside of Azure API management, which is more the pro IT side of things. And if we look at, there's a post that was, here it is, that you see how easy it is and how kind of built it into the experience and how interconnected everything is. So when you have some type of API that you have inside your organization, you can easily just publish these out to any user. So if you want to have a employee lookup that is from another application, maybe you have an HR system, a legacy API, HR system, you don't want to change that out, you can still connect to that and get that data by using this type of API services, or again, as I said, an Azure function. So here you see how easy it is. Actually, just click and you export it, and then once you've done that, you give it a name, and once you've published it, it gets available as a connector inside of your apps. So then you can add any connectors here. You see searching it up as you would any connector, and you see that there's a employee lookup. So that's a really good aspect of it as well. Everything is not meant to be citizen development, but this is a good way of publishing things. So let's look at the other side of the coin, right? When we do this, we have to understand the concept of APIs. And there are some things that took me a while to understand, like what type of format. Not every API returns a format that is just easily consumable. And we either have to parse them, as you saw in the Power Automate flow that we had, where you go down. So if you have an XML, for instance, we can't put that in as a custom connector. It has to be JSON. It has to be a certain standardized format, and we have to understand these things. But we can always do it. But can we add it as a custom connector? So you would have to look at the response type that you get. And then also understanding what type of actions can you perform. You can get data, you can post data, you can update and delete, and you can do some actions from these APIs. And understanding the different types of these would be smart to do. So a way that I learned from this is actually by a competitor of ours. But there's a great website called the Programmable Web, and it describes what an API is. They also have an API directory of almost 25,000 APIs, ranging from these standardized APIs from Google Maps APIs and YouTube APIs to some very specific where you can search, for instance, within shipping. If you need to have a shipping interface and you have to sort of publish data to and book shippings and stuff like that, the FedEx API, the UPS API, and DHL, everything is in here. And this is a great way to kind of go get this. And you see there are some that are RESTful APIs. That's the one that we can consume, different versions and different types, but some of them are RPCs, or you see some of them would also be XML. And if you see that, then you have to use Power Automate to do that and create a flow. If not, we can create these awesome custom connectors. And so if you wanted to create a custom connector, I'm just going to take you really quickly through the process here. So while that loads, I'll just switch slides here, because the next thing we have to do is, of course, create these custom connectors. And again, it's a very nice way to get your data out into your organization and bring it available in any context that the user might need it. So these are the APIs that I've created before. This one I've actually imported from a Swagger file. So when you see here, there's a bunch of different ways to create a connector. You can go from blank, which we're going to do, or you can create it from an Azure service, which you saw you can do if you have an Azure API service, or you have a Azure function. We can go connect to these. There's also an open API file, and these are the ones that are standardized. So if you want to import them, these are called Swagger API standardizations. There's a lot of information around Swagger and how these are, but you can download them and pull them up here, or you can just connect. In many cases, you can just connect to the API and just give them the URL. The service will go get the formats and all the functions and everything, and you can create a custom API inside of here. And there's also a Postpan collection. So Postpan is an application that you can download. It's a great way of doing debugging and a way to kind of connect and try and play around with the APIs before you actually create a connector. So I think I have it open here somewhere. Oh, here it is. So where you can create these and test it out, where you get your setup here, you add your keys and APIs inside the headers. So there's a lot of header information that you can add, and then you'll get response in the body. So when you click send, it will return the response inside of here. Quite easy to do, and in some cases the APIs are open. And the API that I've worked with is a very open API. This could be public available information or things of that nature. So the one that we're going to play around with is called Brennisen, which is a Norwegian governmental service for all the companies inside of Norway. And there are some tests that you can do here. Like for instance, I can copy this. And this is normally how URLs is built up. And this is also something that you might want to learn about, how we pass parameters through. You can do this in PowerApps as well. You can put any parameter inside of your app by just putting a question mark afterwards, and then the parameter name, and then the value of that parameter. And so you see there's a URL, and then behind the question mark, you can pass parameters. So here you see that we have this is Norwegian for name. If we write Microsoft in here, you'll see that we'll get a response. And this is the JSON format. It doesn't look very nice in this sense, but if we pull it up in prettify JSON, like so, there are a lot of different ways to prettify it. And what it does is just formats it really easily for you so that you can actually get a hold of what's in here. So paste that in, you'll see this looks much more pretty. And JSON is just a way of entering data. So you see here, there's an embedded, and under embedded, there's units, and then under that, there's a bunch of different companies, and the organizational number, the name of the organization, the type of code, and you see this is a structured table with tables underneath it. So it can be very complex, and you can get a lot of data out of this. And you can parse these inside of Power Automate as well, or you can create a connector. So what we do is we'll create a new connector from blank. Yeah, and of course, you can import from GitHub. That's also the final type of way to do it. But we'll start from blank, and we'll just do let's call it this. So you can upload an image. You can select the color, and then we'll have the host name, which is the base of the URL that we had. So if you look at this, the base of this is this right here, before any slash and after the HTTPS. So you'll put that in here, and then you can set where the base URL. I'll just put it in the root of this. Security, and this is where you can say what type of authentication. You can use OAuth. Then when you add the connector to your user, you would have to put in the OAuth authentication. We can use API keys, or we have basic authentication. In this case, there's no authentication, so it's really simple. And then inside of here, you can create different actions. So I'll create a new action. I'll just call it name, because that's what we're searching for. And there's different visibilities that you can set on this. How do you want to expose it to the users? And you also have to have an operation ID. And this is what you pull into your applications. Now, if you want to have a request, we can easily import that from the sample. So when I create the request here, this is the URL that we put in. So if we put in this, I'll just copy this and I'll put it in here. And you'll see that we have one parameter called name, and we have some value here, but it's going to disregard the value, but it's actually going to pull out this information here. And these are the different verbs that you can send. So you can get, you can delete, you can patch, you can change that, you can send the header information. But what we're doing now, we're just getting information. You saw that some of the boxes now was removed. If you delete something, you have to say what post you delete. If you want to post something and update, create a new record, you have to have information in here. So you would then post the body of that message in here. But if you just want to get it, you'll just put get, we'll import that, and you'll see that it immediately pulls out this query. And what we can do inside of this, we can also edit this. And there's something that you want. If you want it required, it's going to get required inside the application as well. So when you ask this API, go get the name, we'll put it as required. And then you would, it's really easy. It comes after the function, then comma, and then the next parameter, then comma, and the next parameter, and comma. So if you don't put it in here, you actually have to use brackets, and you have to say what type of parameter you're putting in and updating, and then you have to do a bit more to get this in. But if you put it as required, it's really easy. So just make sure you do that. That's one way of getting it. The next thing we have to do is we got to format the response. And as you saw, this doesn't say a lot, but if we just copy this, we'll get a lot of help. We'll just click the default here. Right now, it'll just return the entire body, and then we have to do a parse at the application side. But we want this formatted and prettified for us, so let's put it in here. We'll just paste that body, the example that you get, and then it pulls out all the different fields, structured and everything. And you can go in and you can do edit here, and you can call it something else, and you can say what type of string, if it's a string, or what type of format do you want it in. So you can do a lot of changes to that when you want it to be consuming it from the user side. And then the next thing you would do is create a test, but you have to create the connector first. We'll just create the connector here, and you'll see that it actually now spins up all the services inside the cloud. So you'll see that it actually pulls up everything that you have, and it publishes this, and now we have a connector. That's how hard it is to create a custom connector. So now we can test it, but I have to create actually, because now I don't, as a user, I don't have a connection, so it doesn't know what context it has. Even though we created it, we have to go and create a new connector. It just says as easy as this. And then we have to go in, back in. This is the detour that I hopefully they'll fix sometime. Make it a bit easier, because we have to go back in, we have to edit it. And 1, 2, 3. I've made too many. Here we go. Edit. And then test. And you see here now, if I search for Microsoft and we test this, we get it back. I've kind of speed run this now, and I've made a 15-minute video where I actually create the connector, create an application, and then put that information inside of finance and operations. Sorry, I thought I actually put it inside of a Dataverse. But it's really easy to do this if you want to move on, and I'll show that in the reference that I got inside my PowerPoint. So again, there's only one thing that I want to show you, and that is another thing that took me a while to get. And another way that you ask for this is just by adding the company name after this. So there's another way of opening this up. So let's just do another one. I just want to show you this, because if you want to search for organizational number, let's do org number. When we import, for example, here, let's say, because if I do like so, it would just pull out that one record, and you see here that I have the parameter that I'm looking up is actually in here. So just to make sure that you know how to do this, because this took me a while to understand, I'll do get, I'll paste it in here, but instead of doing this, I'll do brackets and then name I'll do square brackets, and then I say org num, what's that? And then I'll end that off with a bracket. Now, if I do import here, it'll do the same one, but it will. It didn't. That's perfect. Oh, it should recognize that. Let's try that again. Was it these brackets? Ah, there we go. Okay, not square brackets, these curly brackets. And then you'll see it pull out that that parameter, and it will actually put it as required automatically. So that's another way of doing it, either as a get parameter that you post as a string afterwards here, the question mark and yada yada, or like so. Those are the two different ways of doing it. So now you know, and you don't have to go figuring that out. I'm a bit conscious of time, so I thought I'll just move on and talk about kind of how you can use this further on, because the demo, we've done that. And we were going to have a Q&A. I just want to do this first. These are the different kind of paths that you can go through. For me, one of the first thing that I would do if I wanted to connect to something is exactly what June did. Use Power Automate to do these connectors. And then you want to standardize that and use that inside of your organization. You could use, of course, the standard connectors. If you have standard connectors, you can go use those. But if you don't have a connector to this, you would go out and you would create a custom connector if the API would make, if it's the right type of format. So it has to be a REST API. Other way of doing that is create an Azure function. So go to your pro devs and ask them to create this function, because everything that you saw that June did, you can create as an Azure function and just have one call. You send the picture out and you get all the information back, and then you'll just post it where you need it. And then the fifth and final way is actually from more of an IT perspective, by using Azure API management, creating these standardized APIs, much more rigid and much more structured process. But it's also a lot more kind of corporate or an enterprise grade setup. So that's basically what I wanted to talk to you about. Now, when you get this slide at the end here, there are a bunch of different resources that you can look at. And one other thing before we do the Q&A, Thomas Hansog has created this custom connector gallery that I did want you to know about. It is quite simple to get to it, and please publish your own APIs there once you get it. So there are some that's already been created, and it's really easy to just go in and add your own third-party APIs here. So do contribute, please, if you create something, if it's just for the love of it or testing it, but do share. All right. So that is my half an hour-ish talk. Any questions? I would love if you have any questions. If not, I'll go through and I'll consume this API that we created inside of PowerApp.
Thank you, Frederick. Thank you so much. I have a question that we know it's a low-code platform,
Yep.
but how much still programming knowledge is required to start learning Power Platform or Power Apps?
Well, PowerApps is a bit hard. I mean, if you want to consume it inside, you have to know how to call the function and how to do the primary things to get that data in. Is learning to work with collections. Collections isn't that hard to understand once you get a hold of it, but understanding the concept that you're kind of building a virtual table inside of your app, and then what do you do with that table and that data once you get it in there, because you're actually going out and just calling this. If you look through the video that I've shared with my kind of rush through setting this up within 15 minutes, you'll see when I go out and I'll consume the API, it's just calling that connector with some information in it. So it shouldn't be that hard, but there are some there's a bit of a leap to understanding the concept of using collections, and I think that's, if you want to do this, you should go check that out.
Okay, and can we use this connector in Power Automate and Power Apps? There is some limitation to use a single connection. Is there any workaround for it?
No, these are actually available as connectors inside of Power Automate as well. And the same connector that we did now with the organizational number, where we just get return the information about the customer. I've actually built that into a demo where from when I create a new record, as long as I got the organizational number in, it will start off a new Power Automate flow, and it'll pull in all the addresses and all the information about the customers, fully automated. So then you don't have to open a Power App to do that, but you can just consume it inside of the standard user interface. And the only thing you have to do is put in a unique ID for the customer.
Okay. Thank you, Frederick. It was an amazing session. Hopefully, we will see you again in our future events. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I got a question to Frederick.
Yep.
So if would you mind sharing all the links with the audience, because you have
Yep.
showed so much things and these are so powerful and so knowledgeable links there. So are you planning to share your presentation with us so that we can share with the community?
Absolutely. I'll send you the deck and all the different links that's in the end there. You'll be able to go and browse. There's some somewhere where you want to gain some knowledge and understand APIs, what I used to kind of upskill myself, as I'm not a developer, it's there's a lot of information there, and it's a lot of fun as well, just trying it out. So yeah,
Absolutely, like we just saw all the fun in your next in your 30 minute session. So it's a lot, and it's a lot to absorb, and it's a lot to learn. So thank you so much if you can share all the presentation links with us so that we can tag all the links with your recording.
yeah, of course.
Thank you, Frederick, for your time.
Thank you.